Okay, so we're back. It's lesson 2, and we want to kick off our application. So I'm going to choose debug and start without debugging, which will start IIS Express and assign a random port and launch our little application. Right, so we haven't made any changes to it other than adding a README file is all we've done today. So we had our built-in home, about, and contact pages that the Visual Studio template generated. And then the end of class last week, we added a link to our nav bar, and it called the gallery method, which we added to our home controller, right? So we had an index, about, and contact method in here. And we added this method last week that returned a view called gallery. So what we're going to do today, we're going to add another link. We're going to, this time, build our own controller. We're going to build a controller and a view, and we'll look at how we can pass data from one view to another. So if we click a link, how do we not only load another page, but also provide some parameter information to that? Now, eventually, Visual Studio will automate this stuff and make it super easy for us. In fact, Visual Studio will build controllers. Well, we'll look at what the options are that we have. So let's right-click our controllers. We'll choose Add a New Controller. So we have tons of choices here. We've got 8 or 9 options. I think we've got 8 options. The bottom 5 are all irrelevant to us because they're all for building a controller in an API. We'll do this in December, our last few lessons before our test. We're not building an API now, we're actually building a web application. So we can safely disqualify all 5 of those options, which leaves us with these 3 options: empty, read write, and controller with views using Entity Framework. Eventually, and most of the controllers we're going to build for our music store, as well as the controllers you guys will build for your assignments, eventually we're going to pick this option. I'll actually show you what it looks like in a minute, but we're not going to use it today. We're going to have to get our database set up. Yes, stop outing Virginia. We have to get our database all set up and everything, so we'll get to that probably next week or the week after. But I will show you what this looks like. So we're just going to pick an empty controller. We're picking an empty MVC5 controller. Let's call it Store Controller. You see the word controller automatically appears in the file name. We don't need to give it any extension. The extension is automatically will be assigned to CS. Okay, so just call it an empty controller called Store Controller. So a couple of things will happen. We get a controller, and it actually writes an index method automatically. We don't need this. We want to get rid of it. You can get rid of it. But it will run at the URL localhost or whatever domain /store. The other thing that will happen is inside of views, Visual Studio now generates a store subfolder. There's no view there, but any views we want to create can go inside of it. Okay? So we're going to need to create an index view to have something to load. So we have a method, but we don't have the view yet. So we can easily create a view. So we can do it one of 2 ways. We can go down here, or I can just right-click where it says Return View, and I'll just, from the context menu, choose Add View. So by default, it names the view index, so the same view, the same name that our method name has. We have all these templates, so this is also going to save us a ton of time. Again, we'll look at this in a minute. It says, what template are we using? Create, details, edit, empty. So we'll just say empty without a model for today because we don't have any models yet. We will in the next week or 2. And then it asks if we want to use a layout page. Do we want to use a layout page for this? Yeah. Which layout page do we want to use? Where do we find it? Yeah, in views, shared and layout, right? Because that's our site template that has our header and footer, our CSS, and our JavaScript. We don't have to pick it, but otherwise we just get a blank page with nothing on it. And we're generally going to use our layout files. So it'll default to, it'll say views, shared layout. We're going to call our view index and our empty template. Okay. We'll put some HTML on here, but not yet. For now, we just want to see if this actually loads. So now our URL we should be able to try is localhost/store. Right? This should automatically call the index method of our store controller. And it doesn't. Let's try that. It's because we didn't say index. It is not. It is because we added a new controller, but we haven't recompiled our DLL. So our current version of the DLL doesn't include the source code for our new CS file. That's right, Ali. So we better go back and build. It says that both projects built successfully. So now we can refresh. The store index works. Is this going to work, do you think? If we take index out, is it still going to work? Yep, works fine. So index is the default method. If we don't specify what method we want to call in a controller, it will automatically call the index method. So also we get friendlier URLs, right? /store is a better URL than /store/index. So creating a new controller, simple as that. Now, eventually I'll show you what this looks like in an application where my application's already connected up to a database. So this is where we're going. I'll show you what this whole scaffolding looks like. So here's a little project I've been working on. So here are all the model classes. Each one of these classes is related to a table in our SQL Server database. So for example, I have a skill model. Looks very much like a Java class. We've got some properties, data types, and get and set methods. So what I don't have in here, so I've got this model. Let's say I need a series of pages now so I can manage the skills in the database. So I can add, edit, delete, and view the list of skills. We can actually do this without writing any code at all, which is awesome. So if I go to controllers, I'll right click and say add a controller. But this time I'll pick the controller with views using Entity Framework. So Entity Framework is Microsoft's data access library. So this time I'll pick different options. It says, what model does this controller interact with? So if I'm interested in managing the skills, I'll pick skill. It already defaults to my layout and it gives it the name of skills controller. This is not in this project. I'm showing you where we're going. You can just, you don't have to add this. We don't have models yet. We have to set up our database and models before we can do that. So that's not this week. Okay. So here's my controller. It writes an index, details, create, edit, delete methods for us. And in the views, it now creates a skills folder with create, delete, details, edit, and index methods. And all of these are actually functional. So if I compile my site, and go to skills, we'll load the index method, which will automatically, once I build, gives us an index view with links for adding, editing, and deleting. So I can add it, delete. Now, obviously, this is not a finished application. I couldn't just hand this off to a client and say, there, I clicked add controller 17 times, here's your website, here's your invoice. But this obviously saves lots of time. Right now, I have to customize these things. like this list, for example, is not sorted alphabetically. There's no paging, there's no searching, but this gives me a really good starting point, right? Same here, I may want to add drop downs, I might add validation and other things. So once we have our database model set up, Visual Studio will generate the controllers and views for us, and then we just customize them so that our application works exactly the way it needs to. So this is where we're going. Today we're going to do it manually so we kind of understand how the controllers and views work together a bit more. So let's go back to our store. Index is a really lousy page title. It automatically gives it whatever the name of the view is. It shows up as the title in the browser bar as well as in the H2. Let's change this to just put a little bit of content on here. And let's add UI. In a week or two, when we're connected up to our database, this page will show actual products from the database. For today, we're just going to mock up the data. We've just got a simple unordered list. That says product 1, 2, 3. So what we want to do is we want to now make each one of these a link that will go to another page, and that page will display whatever product the user picked. Kind of like our edit links in the list all go to the edit page, but there's a parameter attached to that link so the edit page knows which record to show. So we'll use our action link method we looked at last week. Our first link, we'll say product 1. So what URL do we want to go to when the user clicks on a particular product? So this URL is /store. What would be an appropriate name for the next page that will show information about a selected product? Daniel? The challenge is then we actually need a specific product 1 page. We want a generic page that will show whatever product the user clicks on. So we want that URL to be what? /store/ could be /item. Yeah, it could be /product. So we'll create a method called product. We're using kind of this version for now. Our first parameter, the text on the link. Second parameter, name of the method or action we want to call. What's the third parameter? Close. Ali, I think you said it. Right. Which controller does that product method live in? So I'm not sure if that's what you meant. Okay. So what controller is going to handle this request? Yeah, the store controller we just. This will generate a link that goes to /store/product. We'll just check this, make sure it works okay before we use the same link on the other two. I refresh this and click it. Okay, that's the right idea. That's what should happen. Why do we get a 404 error? That's /store/product. Yeah, there's no page and there's no method. So we're trying to call a product method in our store controller, but we haven't built that yet. So this behavior is expected. So we'll use action link on the other two links as well. Here's product 2. We're calling. Awesome. So we're calling the same method each time. So clicking any one of these links is going to take us to the exact same place. We're sort of simulating here where I can click edit beside any one of these skills, and it takes me to /skills/edit. And then it tells me which skill we want to look up. We're doing this one step at a time. So right now, these are all links, but they all go to the same place, right? So now we need to also tell this page, well, we need the product method, but we also need to tell the method which product are we looking at. Otherwise, the user clicks the link and they get the exact same thing every time. So in our store controller, we'll write a get method that will run at the URL store product. So it's a good idea. Typically, whenever we write a new method, we make a comment above that describes what URL is invoked. So what do we need? What do we need to return in here? Yeah. So we'll just return a view. If we don't specify any name, it will look for a view called product. So let's save. Try again. Why are we getting 404? Okay, so we need to create a view. We'll just add view. You can just click the add button here. We don't have to change anything. The view will be called product, and it defaults to the one layout template we already have. And our template, again, is empty without a model for today. So add the product view. And refresh, and nothing. Right, again, thank you, it's Luis, right? Luis is right. Right, we added the method in our store controller, didn't build, so it doesn't recognize the product method yet until we compile. So I'll build. And now our product page loads. Yep. So we're writing a method called product that returns a view, and the return type of the method is action result. Okay, when you mouse over it, you should see an error. What does it say? Do you have an index view that looks like this? Is there an index view in your controller? Do your other views work? Do the other views in your project work? Well, have a look and compare them. See if there's anything different. No, it should be a separate view. So Visual Studio generated index automatically, and product is exactly the same, except the name is called product rather than index. So compare your product method to your other ones and see if there's anything different about them. The only difference should be the method name. I can look if you need me to. So this is working so far, except we still haven't dealt with the fact that the page isn't indicating which product the user clicked on. They still get the same page no matter what, right? If I click product 1, I get the exact same thing as if I click product 3, which isn't really all that helpful. The whole point of this page is to show us details about the particular product the user is interested in. So we need to modify our index view a bit. What we have is okay, but we need to attach a parameter on to the end. So here's how we do it. So we'll go back to index. So our action link, there's 10 different overloads here. And we need to use a different overload. We're actually going to use this one, version 7 of 10. So our first 3 parameters will stay the same. Text on the link, number 1, action name, number 2, controller name, number 3. But then there are 2 more parameters. We really only need 4 of the 5. So this next one says root values. So this is any parameters we want to attach onto the end of the link. So we need a parameter we can set up like this. So add on to the end product 1. So we can go back to the browser in a minute and take a look at what this looks like. If I refresh now, whoops. All right, we need the 5th parameter here. It doesn't work. The last parameter it's asking for are any HTML attributes. So if we want to add, let's say, a CSS class to this link, or we want to enable, disable it. In this case, we don't need any HTML attributes, so we'll just set that to null. I'll add one later just so we can see how that works. But for now, we'll make it null. So now my product 1 link looks like this. It passes on a key called product name and the value of product 1. Eventually, we'll want friendlier URLs like this, where we don't have to have those key names. And when we use the auto-generated views, it will do that for us. So let's add some parameters to 2 products. Oops, I missed a comment here. So they're all going to load the product page, the product view. But each one is passing in a different product name to that page. So we've made the changes we need to make on our links. We need to make 2 other changes to get this to work. So we want it so the product page will actually show the name of whatever product the user clicked on. Makes sense? We're passing a value through the link from one page to the next. So here's the hint. First thing we're going to have to change is here. What will we need to do in here? Right, so our method name, so what data type is our parameter? String, and what did we call it on the links? All case product name. So now we can use the viewBag object we saw last week to pass the product name from the method back to the next view. The viewBag is just a stateless, typeless container where we can put variables. Typically, we'll set them in the controller, and we can read them in the view. We want to pass some data, like an error message or some simple, not complex data. One string is relatively simple data, so viewBag will be appropriate to pass it to the view. So now in our view, we should be able to access the viewBag product name property, and we can display it. We'll just prefix this with the server set with an @ symbol, viewBag. Oh, I should probably wrap this in some kind of HTML. And remember, we've changed our method name, so we need to build again. This isn't going to work until we compile. So now we should be able to go click on any product on our store index, and our next page should show us what product we picked. Hopefully. Go back. So if I click on product 2, I hadn't refreshed my page. So it tells me product 2, right? So we passed it via the URL to the next page. I click 3. We're only going to do one more little thing with this that should be a really easy task. Right now, the only way to get to the store is to actually type /store in the browser. Make it much easier if we have a store link in our nav bar. So where should we go if we want to add a link in the navigation bar? Yeah, we'll go to the layout file. And where we added our gallery link last week, we can add a store link in here. So our layout file. If yours isn't open, it's in views, shared, _layout. We'll just add one more HTML option link. The store. What method do we want to call when we click the store link? Yeah, we want to call the index method, thank you. In which controller? In store. So this is why we need to specify the controller name, because we now have 2 index methods in our site, right? We have a home index that loads the site homepage, but now we also have a store index that loads the main page of the store area. So this is why our controller name, it's not enough to specify a method name. Because most of the time, many of these method names will be repeated for different controllers, especially when we use the scaffolding, because all our view names are the same in every section. Right? We're going to have albums, create, index, edit, delete. Artists, create, index, edit, delete. We save this. Now we've got a store, and now we can browse around. Now we'll probably replace this page in the next week or two, because rather than our mock data, we'll want real data in here, which we'll have in the database, which I will give you guys. The last thing I'm going to do is just push this stuff again. So I'll go back to Team Explorer and click on Home and Changes. I'll say Store Controller and Views and Lesson 2. And I'll commit and push, and that will copy the store controller, the new views, as well as the change in the layout file. Pardon? Sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. Oh, how to do it through the command line? If you want to do it in the command line, first you run git add dot, right? All the files we've just created, you need to add them. So it should say it's adding the store controller and the layout and the store index and store product views. It should show you that it's adding those files. Sorry, it won't show you that. It'll show you that after you do a commit. So first you do git add dot, then do git commit -m with some kind of message. You might say add store controller. So git add dot, git commit -m, and then git push origin and master. So you don't need this line and you don't need this line. Git add dot, git commit -m, git push origin master. That will upload your changes to GitHub. Question.
I tried to push through Visual Studio. And it's giving me an error. It says failed to push the remote repository to. But it doesn't give me any details.
As I said, when it works in Visual and Team Explorer, it's great, right? All I did was click, type, click again, and I'm done. Maybe try it through the command line. Trying to debug it through Team Explorer when things go wrong is difficult because it doesn't give us much info or give us much control to fix errors. So try your command line. Question? Yeah, so I went to Changes. So I went Team Explorer, Home, Changes. And then it will show you the files that you've changed. You just type a commit. As soon as you type anything in that enter a commit message, then just click commit all and push. Yeah, so then, yeah, well, first of all, you'll see a message that says it's pushing, and it will either say push successfully or it will give you an error. But if you want to check after you've pushed, the safest thing to do, go back to your repository and check it. So it tells me updated that I just updated it and that there's my latest commit message, right? So I know that it worked. And if I go to 3 commits, right, it shows me, and if I go in here, I can actually see the store controller. Right. any files that are new, any files you've removed, or any files you've changed. So that's kind of the beauty of this. So if you break something, you can go back and it will show you, right? Like green means all this code is new. So I didn't have it. Here's my layout, right? My layout file's not new, but it says this line is new from the previous version. The previous version didn't have line 28 with the store link. So if we break something, it's easy to go back and undo stuff and compare file by file, line by line. So that's kind of where this is really helpful. And also, it's also a way of doing an offline backup, right? You lose your computer, it dies. Well, your code is backed up on GitHub. Right? So you're not dependent on your machine, and you shouldn't be without your project, because it should be. So as you're working on your assignments, regularly you should be backing them up to GitHub in case something happens to your machine. Yep, that works too. That works too. Okay. Just a couple of quick things, and then I will actually let you go. Rather than a break, your break is for the week, starting in about 5 minutes. Okay? For next week, a few things I would like you to do, please. Number one is, if you haven't installed SQL Server, please install it. The link is right. Okay. My screen is black, which is awesome. I'm going to have fun navigating this. Okay. Well, I'm trying to get you there. Okay. So download and install. There's professional enterprise. You don't need them. Download either developer or standard. You can get them from the Imagine store. Okay. When you start SQL Server up, you're going to get a screen with a whole bunch of options. And the very first option at the top says, start a new installation or add features to an existing one. You just click that link. You're doing a new installation. Okay. You can accept all of the defaults. You don't have to change anything. There's one spot in there where it may ask you for an administrator password. It sets up a default administrator account with this username, SA lowercase, which stands for system admin. Okay. If it asks you for this and you put in a password, please put the password in a text file. Because if you forget your administrative password, well, you've locked yourself out of your own database, and basically your choice is reinstall it once you lock yourself out, unless you know a lot more about SQL Server than I do. Okay, so make sure you put that file somewhere you don't lose it, and use it or use a password you commonly use. You're not going to forget it. Okay, but you can just accept all the defaults. So download that from here. We'll look next week at using SQL Server Management Studio, which is Microsoft's much better version of MySQL Workbench. There's a lot of really neat tools which we can look at next week. Okay, so please have that installed for next week. If you don't have an Azure subscription, or your Azure subscription has expired, we're going to want to try to put our application up on Azure next week and also set up our database on Azure. So please email Greg, our technician, cstech@georgiancollege.ca. Tell him my Imagine subscription has expired, or I've never had one, but I can't imagine anybody in this room's never had one. Probably everybody's had one by now. So let Greg know so that we can try to deploy to Azure next week. Last thing, and then you guys are free. And I can hang around for a little bit because I know there's probably people with problems, some issues. I'll do my best to help. Is Lab 1. Here's Lab 1. It's relatively simple. It's due Monday at 5 o'clock. Here's what I want you to do. Create a new MVC project. You don't need to add unit tests, and you don't need to add authentication. Just a plain .NET MVC application. Call it COMP2084 Lab 1. You do not have to write any code at all. I just want to see you can create the project in Visual Studio. Then create a new repository. Use any of the methods you can to upload your code to GitHub. You can use the command line, Team Explorer, GitHub Desktop, GitHub extension, Visual Studio. Any one of those will work. But please make sure you have the gitignore file. Now, the gitignore file is going to be easier because now that you have it on your machine for your music store, you can just copy and paste the file from the music store directory into your Lab 1 directory. You don't have to download it and do the whole save as, rename, pick file type. You don't have to do that. You can just copy the file. I hope. You're shaking your head no, you can't? Well, hopefully you can copy the file. If not, I have recorded how to do it. Okay, so you don't have to write any code. Your repository doesn't have to be private in this case because everyone's project is going to be exactly the same. I just want you to go through on your own, set up a Visual Studio project, get it uploaded to GitHub. So all you have to do is submit the link to the repository. Okay, so but make sure you have the gitignore to get the full marks. It's worth 2.5% of your grade, which is pretty easy, really, should be easy. We're not having to write any code. Make sure the gitignore file is there and that the packages don't get uploaded. And I'm just going to click your link, check your repository, make sure your file is there and the packages are not there. There's your full marks. Okay, won't take very long. Vlad, question. That's fine. No problem. Okay, if you've already uploaded your music store project, okay. That means you know how to make a project. Ideally, I'd like you to do another one on your own without me walking you through it. Okay, so actually I would suggest still do that. You can just email the link to me if you've submitted on Blackboard. Okay? So sorry, yes, if you already did that with the music store, create another one that you did on your own. Yeah, just email the link to your new one. Okay, you're free to go. I do have office hours Monday, and I'm around Tuesday and Wednesday, and I will stick around to do a little troubleshooting. Have a nice weekend. Give me 1 second to stop.